attorney. At this time also, ladies and gentlemen, if you have mobile devices with you, I would ask you to check those and put those on silent for me. And if you are a speaker today, please come to the podium and make sure the red light is on the speaker when you are speaking to us. Moving to item number 2, approval of the agenda. Gentlemen, you've had the agenda, I think, for a while to take a look at, so I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Abley. So motion to approve by Commissioner Abley. Item number 3 is presentations. We have none scheduled. Excuse me, on the agenda. All in favor, raise your right hands. It's 5-0, Madam Clerk. I'm so sorry. And presentations are none. Moving on to scheduled public hearings. Item number 1 from Community Development is a subdivision text amendment, STA 2018-01 in public hearing. This time we will ask Pete Minner to come forward. Hey, Pete.
Good afternoon, Board. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the introduction. I have 2 items to present today, and the first would be a subdivision text amendment titled STA 2018-01. What we propose to do, this is staff initiated, this is, amendment is proposing to change one part of section 902 where there is a exception for the requirement of septic system verification prior to plat approval. Our department feels that if somebody is proposing a large development of land, a major subdivision, that they should make some assurances that those lots in which they wish to subdivide and sell are suitable for septic systems. And so the people that would be buying those lots have some assurance that those lots are suitable for septic. Currently, the subdivision ordinance in section 902.2 has a clause there that says, in lieu of the developer, subdivider, providing assurance of a suitable septic system for that property, they can simply put a little disclaimer on that subdivision plat that says these lots have not been examined for suitability of septic systems, and therefore that little statement kind of lets them off the hook from having to do those the soil work necessary to verify that lot is suitable for septic. Staff feels that for major subdivisions, and that's subdivisions 7 lots or more, that the developer should have to provide some assurance for those septic system suitability. And so we're proposing amending that second portion of that section 902.2, and I'll just go ahead and read that. Places statement on the final plat stating no preliminary evaluation by a licensed soil scientist for on-site septic systems for individual lots has been done by Burke County Environmental Health Office. Burke County Environmental Health Office has no liability or fault in lots that may be denied or forced to have alternate on-site septic system. That is going to be for minor subdivisions only. Currently, that statement is in there without that for minor subdivisions only, and so it would apply to major subdivisions as well. We feel that that should only apply to minor subdivisions, which is 1 through 6 lots. We find that in most cases when somebody's doing 1 to 6 lots, these are usually people that are local, not always, but mostly people local. They know the person that they're working with or selling to, and there's some assurance there that they're not going to have a problem with those septic systems. For the major subdivisions, these lots oftentimes are marketed online and are sold sight unseen. So I think there's some thought on the part of a lot buyer that these have gone through the review of the county, which they have, and the county, as part of their review process, makes sure that those lots are suitable for septic system. But in the current ordinance, all they have to do is put that statement on there, and there's no verification done. So I might have made it sound a lot more complicated than what it is. We're just wanting to amend item number 2 to say for minor subdivisions only, that statement can be used.
Thank you, Pete. Questions for Peter?
Mr. Chairman, Peter, I understand the motion and what we're trying to do here. I guess my biggest question is, not only do you have to, or do you need as a buyer to qualify that you can place a septic tank, but it also can be placed in an order that you can be X number of foot away from your well, because you can't place the septic tank before the well.
Right.
And I understand that we're shifting the burden of providing this from the county to the developer.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Is there going to be language in there that both of those must be? I mean, I'd be, if you go out and pay $10,000 or $12,000 a lot and find out you can't build a house, you're going to be mighty unhappy. So
right.
How are we going to ensure that this exchange doesn't come back to bite us?
That's a good question. And so if this amendment is approved, whenever somebody proposes a major subdivision, we will not approve that subdivision through the planning process until they show us that a soil scientist has evaluated each and every lot. There's a soil report provided to us, or the Burke County Environmental Health Department has gone out and evaluated each lot. And when they do that, as you said, they have to look at the distance between any proposed well and that septic system. There's a 100-foot distance that's required between well and septic. So that would be done prior to the county approving a subdivision plat. Right now, that's not the way it. If they put that statement on their plat, we have to approve it.
Under the minor development?
Under any development.
Yeah, but under the minor development, how much is the minor? What point do you cut off? It's not minor, it's major.
Yeah, 6 lots.
6?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read that, I remember.
Normally we see lots of 1 or 2 at a time. That's by far the majority of minor subdivisions that we see, but the ordinance has 1 to 6 as a minor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Pete?
Mr. Chairman. Pete, what about other counties around us? Do we have other counties that are enforcing this kind of requirement?
I don't really know how the other counties do that, to be honest with you. Staff, our department just feels that we think it's important that be changed. And if somebody wants to develop a major subdivision, they should perform that work to save somebody that's out of town, that's not coming to the property to look at it, that may not be experienced in reading a plat or something, that they have some assurance that they're going to be able to get that septic system on that property. That's our department's feelings. We hadn't really reached out to find out what other counties are doing.
Is that something you could do before our next meeting to kind of see what other
Yeah,
folks are doing?
could do that.
What about how feasible is it? Say this is sometimes they're 10-acre lots, they're large lots.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're all wooded. How feasible is that, at this point, not knowing where a house may be proposed?
Right.
How would the developer know where to take the samples? How would that be done?
Right, and that's a good question. That's, in the past, when Crescent Resources used to do most of the major subdivisions in Burke County, what they would do is when they proposed their lots, they would designate an area as a home site on there, and they would have that area that they designated evaluated for soil and wells and things ahead of time. Even when it wasn't a requirement, they went ahead and did that so that they could provide that assurance to potential lot buyer.
Do you have any idea what the cost of that service is?
I don't, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Is that something that the county could do?
The county could do that. If the developer, rather than hire a soil scientist, they could get with the county they would permit each lot, and as they permitted each lot, they would evaluate that lot for well and septic. And I believe the county charges about $300 per permit. So the well is $300, the septic's $300. So if they were evaluating both, it'd be about $600, give or take, dollars per lot.
So in order, at that point, and Rebecca might be able to respond to this, you would require a permit to do that?
Right.
They'd have to know where the proposed house would be, or?
That same thing there. If environmental health went out to evaluate the lot, the homeowner either has to have the area staked out, or the home property owner would need to be there with the environmental health technician and show them where they propose the house to be, and he would evaluate the soil in that area. He has like an auger where he checks the soil.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments for Pete? Hearing no further questions, and Pete, with your task to check with other counties, and without objection, this item will remain on the agenda.
Okay.
Moving to item number 2, Pete, zoning map amendment ZMA 2018-07.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll go through this one. Hopefully I won't make it too complicated. This zoning map amendment involves a piece of property here in Burke County that's about 4.16 acres. It's currently zoned Conservation District Low Density. They wish to rezone the property to planned residential mixed use conditional district. And that conditional district is very important in this rezoning, in that what that means is there's uses that are allowed by right, and then there's uses that are allowed as a conditional use in each zoning district. If someone proposes to rezone a property to a conditional district, That means that during the rezoning process, we're looking at both uses by right and conditional use, and they're both looked at and evaluated in the rezoning. Now, a conditional district rezoning also means that the county can limit the uses to one specific use that would be allowed there. And in this particular case, that's what the applicant is requesting. Rather than all of the different uses that may be allowed in the planned residential mixed use as use by right and conditional district, they're only asking for the one use. So that makes this rezoning a little bit easier to evaluate, because there's a lot of uses that may not be appropriate for this property if they were not limited. Because they are limited, that makes this much easier to evaluate. What the applicant is wishing to do is to construct a 100-foot tall radio antenna tower on that property. They own a radio station in the town of Valdez, and their radio license is, I think there's an FCC requirement that they find another tower within a certain period of time. And they had, I believe, and I think they call it an RF engineer, look at potential areas for that tower to be, and they found this property or this area, and this property happened to be available for use. And so they contacted the property owner. Property owner was acceptable to their proposal to construct that 100-foot tall radio antenna tower on that property. And so that's when they brought forth their rezoning application. And so again, this, if approved, this would only allow that radio antenna to be constructed on that property. Other uses that would be allowed as by right or conditional use would not be allowed. It's specific to that tower. So again, this is a 4.16 acre parcel of land. I don't know if we have the site plan. There we go. If you can see it there, the area circled is the area that they're going to lease, and the tower would be in the center of that. The area is determined by kind of a fall zone in each direction, so that nothing else would be affected if by some means that tower were to come down. And so when we look at a rezoning, we look at also our land use plan. The land use plan indicates that this area is secondary growth area, which lies just outside the primary growth areas. The plan indicates that within secondary growth areas, the type of development within the primary growth area is projected to expand over time into the secondary growth area. So you'd have both higher density residential and also some commercial development that would expand out into the secondary growth area. So in that respect, the proposed use would would be consistent with that plan. Although, as I mentioned earlier, not every use within the district would be appropriate, but limited to this one particular use, that makes it more acceptable. And so I think your packet indicates the zoning district, shows where the parcel lies within that district, and an aerial view of the parcel. You'll see that it's primarily wooded there. There's one residential structure on the parcel. There's some photographs of the surrounding area. The planning board met on October 25th of this year to hear this rezoning case, and at that meeting, the public was invited to speak. There was one person that did speak from the public, and it was the wife of a gentleman that was also there, and they live in the area. She had some concern that because her husband wears a hearing aid, she thought that maybe the radio antenna transmission would interfere with his hearing aid. I'm not authority on that type of thing, but the applicant was there, who is the radio station operator, and he made an assurance that that would not be the case. It would not interfere with the gentleman's hearing aid. The applicant also did an environmental assessment and submitted that along with the application, and that study found that there would be no impact to surrounding property owners as well. So after some discussion, which included what would happen to the tower if the applicant decided to not operate it anymore, the applicant stated that they would take the tower down and would revegetate the land back to not the way it was, it's wooded, but revegetate the land there. And so the planning board thought that was appropriate, and a motion was made to approve the rezoning application, and the board voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the rezoning. Staff had made some comments here as well, and if the board, in their consideration of this rezoning, because this is a conditional district, y'all can make conditions placed upon it. And so for your consideration, the staff thought that we would make a condition that no other uses be allowed if this rezoning went through. Number two, the maximum height of the communications tower would be 100 feet, and that if there was any future expansion or of the base or the tower, they would have to come back before the county to get approval of that. Number three, the radio station shall provide notice to the county whenever the use of the tower is discontinued, and the communication tower shall be removed from the property within 90 days of that said notice. And the owner of WSVM radio will be responsible for the removal of the tower from the subject property and reestablishment of vegetation in the disturbed areas. And we feel, although the applicant has stated that they're on board with all of these, staff always recommends that those be conditions that they can be held to on the approval. And so that concludes that report. I'll be glad to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Pete. Questions for Peter?
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple. Peter, WSVM's doing that, and they have an AM signal. And my biggest concerns is I didn't see any radios on an AM. You also have to have radios for your antenna. And I didn't see that on the plot, and that has to be done by an engineer. The other question I have, which is probably the most important one, I believe it was 1996, the FCC passed a law that the AM stations would be phased out and you'd be given an FM signal. And that, I think, was a 50-year period, which would bring you into the 20,046. And I understand they're already dual broadcasting. In other words, they got an FM that they're broadcasting to. Mm-hmm. So, I guess the question is, this looks good. I really don't have a question about the application other than if they're going to switch to FM and the money. And I will make one sub-note. If he gets that tower built and he can't make a living in radio, he can certainly make a living in renting it out to cell phones. So I doubt if he'd ever have to turn it down is what I'm saying, because there's always a demand for tower space.
Right. And you make a good point there. And the applicant did mention that that AM/FM situation, and though I don't fully claim to understand it, he did mention that AM would be sort of phased out, and he mentioned himself that within maybe the next 2 years, matter of fact, that they may not have a need for that antenna anymore. And so that sort of prompted the conversation about, well, what's going to happen to the antenna and things. So that's where he said, so well, if we don't need it.
100 feet is not quite tall enough for a good FM signal. So
yeah,
that's the reason I was trying to situate what he
yeah,
was going to do here. But
he will, the applicant will probably be able to answer your question better than I. I think this is, he needs this in order to get through that period of time. Okay. That it's still required, because they also, from my understanding, have an antenna on High Peak Mountain, and that may be the FM antenna or something. I'm not sure. One is just to get through that period of time that's still required of them to have both AM, FM. So
we must assume that town of Valdez is not going to allow them to use the old tower location, evidently. But I don't see any reason from looking at the information here to deny the grant to let him build a tower. I was just, I knew that, I know who the candidate, the applicant is, so I know he has the money to afford it, but I just wondered if he had looked at all that. And yeah, but that's the basic question. I would like to find out about the radios, because that also has to be approved before you can do that. You just can't put radio transmitter lines in any square acre. It's got to be a certain soil condition for it to be effective.
Right, and the rezoning would just basically, I guess he wants to know, you know, if the property is able to be rezoned, then you take those next steps. He don't want to get too far ahead
Sure.
without knowing he can do anything. He did do that environmental study, which is you know, pretty comprehensive to a certain degree, and that I was surprised that they did that, but I think he needed that to fulfill not only with the county but FCC as well. So I think he's working on several things at one time, but they do have to follow a step
It used to
process.
be those radios went out every 10 degrees, and of course, the further they go, the wider part they get as they expand, but I don't know what it is now.
Right.
That's
But,
not relevant.
and just to kind of reiterate, if he was not wanting or agreeing to limit the use to just the antenna itself, the tower and antenna, and wanted all the other uses that could be allowed in that district, staff would not be on board with this. We wouldn't, I don't think planning board would have voted the way they did either.
Well, he can sublease, he can sublease even if it works for the radio. He still can go up and wet bays at certain heights.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, one quick question for Pete. Pete, on here it says when the use of the communication tower is discontinued, you got the radio station has 90 days to dismantle it. They go into bankruptcy. What, if any, recourse do we have? And does that fall back on the landowner, or is that a different subject?
Well, the bankruptcy, I would say that if they quit using the tower, that you know, they're going, whatever the reason, they would have 90 days, and that's something they were okay with. If y'all felt that was too much time or not enough time, that could be changed, but the 90 days is something they were comfortable with on that. I don't know if that answered your question. Either way,
I'm fine with the
bankruptcy-
90 days. I was just wondering if we have any other recourse, say for instance, because we specifically say the owners of the radio station are liable for taking it down, but if something, God forbid, happens and they go out of business, is there any other recourse we have? Does that fall back to the landowner that's leasing the tower?
Well, yeah, that, the landowner is ultimately responsible for whatever happens on that property. Now, he's leasing that area out to those folks. So I guess to answer your question, if for some reason the radio station owner couldn't or refused to remove the tower, it would fall back to the property owner ultimately.
Okay. Thank you, Pete.
Mr. Chairman, one other comment, Scott, those size antennas come in 20-foot sections. That'd be 5 sections. It'll take a while to put it up, a week or two, but take it down today if you got the right equipment. But to further answer your question, if he goes bankrupt, he has no money to take it down, and it eventually will become no taxes paid. It'll eventually end up as either city or county property, and maybe you could sell it, they could sell it. But I'm sure if he got to that point, any smart person would just simply sell it to one of the cell tower folks and move on.
Yeah, that's possible.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none and without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you, Pete.
All right. Should I leave this on? Okay. Thank you.
You can. All right, let's move on to our consent agenda. Item number 1, the Sheriff, Burke Recovery Court Grant. Sheriff, listening.
Thank you, sir. And let me just say, since serving as your sheriff, one of my greatest concerns has been the substance misuse problem that we've had in the county and the direct correlation with crime that you've heard me speak about. And I've spoke to many civic groups, church, and anybody to listen about that discouraging problem that we're having in America as well as Burke County. But as difficult as that has been, there's some heartwarming aspects of that, that the relationships that we have formed with other agencies throughout the county has been great. And the collaboration of all of these brought the culmination of one of the prongs that I've been speaking about for a long time, the treatment prong of substance abuse. And my goal and hope was to have a mental health and substance abuse counselor in our jails, and then subsequent to their release, we've just getting that accomplished. LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, is something that we started a couple of weeks ago, and now what I refer to as drug court has come to fruition with this $500,000 grant from the Department of Correction. And on your agenda, I would just like to recognize some of the people that have made this possible. It's the Cognitive Connection, Catawba Valley Behavioral Health Care, Burke Recovery, Treatment Accountability for Safer Community, Burke Integrated Health, Burke County Public Health, North Carolina Probation, local law enforcement in the North Carolina 25th Judicial District. This grant will be for 4 years. It will start January 1st, 2019, and Burke County will be providing the funding for the grant, but funds will be drawn down during the grant period to reimburse the county, no expense to the county. And I just wanted to recognize we have a lot of support people here. That's really the ones that's going to be administering much of the program. The Sheriff's Office is the vehicle to get it started. So if you have any questions, we've got a lot of people that has worked behind the scenes and made this possible, that we will open up any questions you may have.
All right, gentlemen, questions for the Sheriff?
Mr. Chairman, just a general one, Steve, and some of the entities that this money is going to is out of our county, which means, you know, we're being funded money to an out-of-county, and we're still going to be held responsible to, I guess, disperse the money and make sure that it's being used correctly. And I'm assuming y'all have addressed that. Is that a problem, or is
well, there's some of the ones that I mentioned. Now, they serve more than Burke County, but the court will actually be in Burke County. Catawba County has one already. So most of the people that will be serving will be Burke County defendants.
But that is covered in your lease and agreement, that if it is dispersed, for example, to a Catawba County entity, you know, Catawba County is not going to be involved. It's still going to be Burke County and that entity.
I'll reference these.
It's all Burke County. Cognitive Connection serves both Burke and Catawba. So they are the ones that are doing the Burke recovery of the Catawba Recovery Court. Cognitive Connections is the one that's doing part of the Catawba Recovery Court, and they serve both Burke and Catawba, but all of the ones that will be served underneath this grant are Burke County incarcerated individuals. They will come up here and see those individuals here, and so it will all be in county money.
My second question is an easy one. Will it advance any or give us any more employees? Will we get to hire more people?
Not really.
Okay.
We'll hire a coordinator that will be working with me to coordinate all of the entities that are in the grant and all of the offenders, but not necessarily. But it will give us the ability to hopefully serve these clients so they will not continue to be incarcerated, that they will have the ability to get treatment if it's voluntary, but they will have the ability to get treatment and hopefully not reoffend. Their recidivism rate hopefully will be much less going through treatment so that we won't have to keep paying for them through the court system and through probation, parole, and
So in a nutshell, it allows us to serve more people with the same help that we got,
Yes.
which is beneficial.
more efficient
Yeah.
use of money. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things that we've been trying to do is not just lock people up and do the revolving door. We see that with many people. We'll lock them up just multiple times. So this gives people that's volunteering to do this a path, a different path, rather than go sit in jail and serve their time and start all over. So it's really exciting for all of these agencies to come together and make this possible. I've been told by other agencies that this is really what Burke County now has is very unique, and most counties don't have all of these programs working together like they're doing. So I'm hoping to see some real progress in reducing substance misuse in Burke County.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, without objection, this item is going to remain on the consent agenda. Thanks,
sir.
Sheriff. Moving on to item number 2 is the 2019 commission appointments. There are approximately 20 plus or minus boards or commissions that commission members are appointed to every year, and the chairman, in his prerogative, may keep them the same or ask for anyone that wants to change either one of the boards or commissions they're assigned to. So at this time, I'm going to open it up for discussion and see if there is anyone who is not happy and wants to move to another board and or commission, if you will say so at this time. Well, it appears everybody's happy.
Mr. Chairman, has anybody got a complaint that one of their commissioners are not sufficient? If we've got no complaints,
We have not
Yep.
received a complaint.
if the commissioners are happy, roll the vote.
I'm happy. Jeff, happy? Everybody? I'm happy with what I got. Wayne? All right, we'll just leave those as they are. Madam Clerk, thank you so very much. Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 3 will be the legislative goals voting delegate. As each Board of County Commissioners is requested to designate a commissioner or other official as a voting delegate for the 2019 Legislative Goals Conference, which is going to be held January 10th and 11th, 2019 at the Raleigh Marriott Crabtree in Wake County. So I'm going to open this one up again for discussion. Anybody want to be the voting delegate for us?
Mr. Chairman, again, we usually designate that to the chairperson. I'm happy with that, or the vice chair.
Chairperson can't do it this year because the chairperson is the chair of the Legislative Goals Committee. So I won't
Okay.
be able to do this one.
Well, if the vice chair can't go, I'll go, or we'll appoint somebody, whichever. Vice chair,
I should be able to go.
sounds
All right.
good.
Good.
So moved.
Good.
Nominate.
All right. All right, Madam Clerk, we will put down Vice Chair Scott Mulvey to attend the NCACC Legislative Goals Committee meeting.
Mr. Vice Chairman, will you be needing accommodations, I assume?
Yes, please.
All right, moving on to item number 4 on the consent agenda is a resolution supporting local control of school calendars. Gentlemen, does anyone need me to read over this, or has everyone had the opportunity to read this? Let's open this one up for discussion too, if anybody has any questions about this resolution. I can assure you there will be a legislative goal, go through the Legislative Goals Committee supporting local control of the school calendars.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I did have a question, but was going to wait till I talked to someone. But I am assuming the word control, legislative control, or the control of the school board calendar, does have windows though. They just can't, we're not gonna start July the 4th and end December 31st. I mean, there's windows from what I read in the, so they can't just go crazy with it, but they do have a window to operate.
Have a window to operate, and I think I think we're all familiar with the fact that people on the coast and people in the mountains, because of the weather, et cetera, needs a little bit of control over the dates that when they can start, when they can close.
I think the goal is to have 185 days teaching, so.
Yes, sir. All right, any other questions or concerns? Hearing none and without objection, this will remain on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 5, approval of purchase price for school property. Is anyone here from the school? We got somebody from the school, great. Please come up and tell us your name.
My name is Michelle Myers, and I'll be filling in for Mr. Lawson today. He's asked that I present the following resolution. The Burke County Board of Education requests the Burke County Board of Commissioners approve the purchase price of $90,000 in accordance with NCGS 115C-426F for the following property located in eastern Burke County for the potential construction of a new school, 3901 East Burke Boulevard. The property consists of 4.04 acres according to the Burke County GIS website. This property is a continuation of the acquisition of properties contiguous to the primary tract intended for the construction of a potential new school in the eastern part of the county. If approved by the Board of Commissioners for the preceding tract, there will be a resulting survey cost as well as closing costs and other possible associated costs. If there are any questions at this time, I'd be glad to relate those back to Mr. Lawson.
All right, gentlemen, you've heard the presentation. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, I thought we'd approved this one time before. That was the only question I had when I reviewed it. I thought we had okayed the purchase of that, is to give them a second outlet on that property they bought.
This is an additional piece of property.
Is it?
Yep. So it's my understanding, if I'm correct, this will give road access in the front with this piece of property. A better road access to the back portion of the property, if I remember correctly.
I'm not really sure on that, but I can ask him.
Okay, that property is located right at East Burke Boulevard, is it not?
Yes.
Right in front of it? Okay.
Yes.
According to it, it's located on the back entrance to East Burke High School. Is that correct?
Yes.
Has very little frontage actually on the road, though. It balloons out. It's next to the mobile homes and stuff. I know where exactly where it is, yeah. So you're going to own two parts neck to neck connecting that road then, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just like to point out, there is no resolution in your packet. It's just in the form of a motion.
Okay. Are there any other questions or about the presentation? Jeff?
Mr. Chairman, maybe Mr. Manager or Finance Officer can address this. Any idea at this point where the funds would come from for this?
Current year capital is what you told me.
We got to come up to that microphone.
Yeah, I was loud enough. I asked Keith that question, and it's current year capital. There are funds available.
Any other questions or concerns?
I understand her comment as funds are available from the Burke County schools, not from Burke County. Correct? Burke County schools?
It's in their current year capital,
Yes. That's
but it
what
would come from our capital funds.
Yeah.
That they request.
Okay. Any other questions? Now, Madam Clerk, you want me to do what? Did you say a motion?
You don't need to do anything. I was just letting
Okay.
you know it's not in the form of a motion.
Okay, not in form of motion. All right, if there's no other further discussion or questions, and without objection, this item is going to remain on the consent agenda. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
P.S. Kay, Madam Clerk, could we get them to draw out the other piece of property? I think it's just next door to it, but we don't need them to appear, just to give us what they're adding to. I think they bought 30 acres and then they bought the other piece and now they're buying this, and it'd be nice to have them blocked out.
Got it, Kate? All right. Moving on to item number 6 is a resolution appointing new review officers for the city of Morganton. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. This is a request on behalf of the city of Morganton to appoint some new folks as review officers for the city. They wish to add Jesse James and Mark Hall as review officers. Apparently both these folks have completed a certification course, and while working on this item, it was determined that Russell Cochran has left the city's employment, so we need to remove him as well. So we're going to appoint Jesse James and Mark Hall as review officers and remove Russ Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to ask the obvious question. What does the review officer review?
Plats
Is that,
for subdivisions.
this is all plats for subdivisions?
Yeah, it's pursuant to section 47-30.2 that requires the county commissioners designate one or more persons experienced in mapping or land records management to review plat maps, and this is who the city wants to review their maps.
Any other
Or
questions for Kay on this matter?
So there's only one review officer, there's not two?
There are two in this case.
Right.
Generally there's one, but they wanted two for some reason.
I think they need two.
And I don't know either one, but this is from the city.
Other questions? Comments? Okay, hearing none, and without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving to item number 7, resolution establishing the Board of Commissioners 2019 meeting schedule. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. This is a request that we do annually to appoint or set your meeting schedule for the upcoming year. And it basically sets your regular meetings at 6 o'clock on the first Tuesdays, pre-agendas, pardon me, that was the third Tuesdays, pre-agendas on the first Tuesdays at 3 o'clock. In your packet, there are 2 resolutions. One has a place set aside for any off-site meetings if you wish to do that again next year. We don't have locations determined. We've got some geographical areas in mind, and we could find locations if you choose to do that. You know, we take holidays, county closures into consideration in developing the schedule. We have our budget meetings in this schedule. We have our annual budget workshop day in February set, which will be like the 4th Friday in February. The only thing that we're not sure of at this moment is when County Assembly Day will be held. Last year it was May 30th. We think that might be the same date, but we're waiting to hear back on that. So right now there's 2 resolutions. If you want those off-site meetings, we thought that it might be fun to go to the lake in April, and that might coincide with the completion of the Fonta Flora covered bridge. And then maybe go to Jonas Ridge in the fall and see the leaves. So you all just let me know what you would like, and we'll work on it.
All right, we'll open the floor up for discussion on this matter. Anybody got anything they want to say?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we just remain here. We've gone for several years away from this location, but I haven't seen a great deal of public input at that time. It's a tremendous amount of work for staff to move all the equipment, and sometimes it has been logistically difficult at other locations with other things going on that we don't have control over. It'd just be my opinion that we stay here for pre-agenda as normal.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I disagree with that. I think people like to see and be involved with their commissioners and who's spending their tax dollars. And I find great benefit in it. I get a lot of compliments on it. I know you do too. It is some inconvenience, but we inconvenience our staff more on pre-agenda when we sit up down there and we do when we go to another place and have a meeting. So it's not that great a deal of inconvenience. Plus you get to see and visit parts of the county that you may not otherwise get to see. Meet people that you do not normally get to meet. I also like the meetings out in the country.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Jeff on this just because I understand what Wayne and Anna are saying. I think, it's great outreach, but obviously when we've had these meetings off-site, there hasn't been a lot of turnout or as much interest as sometimes as we anticipate. So, just because of time and effort, I'm not sure it's worth it at this point.
Well, I don't know if we're forgetting or what, gentlemen, but how many went down to South Mountain State Park? You didn't have standing room, let alone standing room only. First visit to senior citizen at East Burke, we didn't have hardly a standing room. The second one was not well publicized, and people met me on Sunday morning at church and said, why didn't you all tell us? So part of that is our own responsibility to notify and get the word out that we're going to meet there. So.
All right, Madam Clerk, hearing both sides, kind of, sort of, move us to the decision item, please, since we do have some I'm not going to call those issues. We have some comments from both sides on that. Please move over to decision. And by that time, hopefully, the NCACC will have a date for us also for that. All right. Moving on to item number 8, appointments and reappointments to the Council on Aging. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to make some appointments and removals to the Council on Aging. The terms of appointment for Jeff Lovett, Eleanor Summers, Susan Janney, Stephanie Baker, Kimberly Ramsey on the Council of Aging ended November 30th. We received applications from Eleanor Summers and Ms. Janney. Ms. Baker has served the maximum number of terms allowed and is not eligible for reappointment. Mr. Lovett's attendance, I'm told, is sporadic, and therefore we're requesting his removal. And we received an application from Kimberly. We anticipate receiving an application from Kimberly Ramsey. We did get one from Mary Wright, and the term is for 3 years. So we're asking to appoint Mary Wright to the Council on Aging, seat number 9, for a 3-year term ending November 30th, 2021, to reappoint Eleanor Summers, Susan Janney, and Kimberly Ramsey, also for 3-year terms ending November 30th, 2021, and to remove Mr. Lovett and Ms. Baker's names from the official roster and thank them for their service to the community.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Questions for Kay on this matter? Hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving to item number 9, reappointment to BDI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Toner's term on the BDI board, which is seat number 3, and at-large seat, ends December 31st, 2018. He is willing to serve another term and has submitted his reappointment application.
All right, gentlemen, questions for Kay on the appointment of Jim Toner back to the BDI board? Hearing none, without objection, this will remain on the consent agenda. Moving to item number 10, reappointments to the Board of Equalization and Review. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This is a request to make some reappointments to the Board of E&R. The terms for James Gordon, seat number 2, who is their chairman, and Doris Smith, seat number 4. in December 31st. Both members are seeking reappointment, and we have received their applications. And the tax administrator requests that Mr. Gordon also be designated as their chairman for the coming year.
All right, you've heard this presentation for Kay. Any questions?
Madam Clerk is chairman of the board. Is that who they recommended, or how did we come up with choosing he would be chairman?
Can you repeat that, please?
You included in your motion the person wanting to reappoint, but you also said, I forgot the name.
Designate Mr. Gordon as chairman.
Yes.
The tax administrator says that's a statutory requirement, and that's who he's chairman now, and that's who.
And
Danny
come on
wanted.
up, please, because I had a question on that too. I wanted to hear if that was a statutory authority that you have to do to appoint the chairman.
No, gentlemen, on the Board of Equalization Review, the county commissioners can appoint a special board, or they can serve on that board. And what Burke County has chosen to do over probably since the late 80s is appoint a special board. Okay, then along with appointing that board, then the commissioners are responsible for appointing someone on that board as chairperson. My recommendation is to stay where we're at, to reappoint Mr. Gordon as chair again. Now, any of the 5 members could be appointed that. He has the experience.
So Mr. Gordon is currently the chairman of ENR?
He is currently the chairman.
So you're just asking for a reappointment?
He's asking for reappointment, and it's up to the Board of Commissioners who they would choose to be chairperson.
Well, see, that's the question. We're recommending in this that he get reappointed, and we just wondered if your board met and y'all chose, that's my question.
We don't have the opportunity, we cannot appoint, the board cannot appoint their own chairperson. That has to be appointed from the Board of Commissioners.
By the Board of Commissioners.
Right.
You answered the question.
They elect their vice chair, but they cannot elect their chair.
Okay. All right, that clears that up for me. Any other questions or concerns? All right, hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 11, Board of Health reappointments presented by Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The terms of Melinda Zimmerman, seat number 1, pharmacist on the Board of Health, Dr. Walrich's term, seat number 3, the veterinarian, and Dr. Gresham Orison, seat number 5, and Carol Largent, seat number 9, on the Board of Health in December 31st. The reappointment of all members is requested except for Dr. Orison. He's had trouble making the meetings, and we have received everybody's application except Dr. Walrich's, and we expect his today or tomorrow. So basically, this is a request to make some reappointments and some removals to the Board of Health.
All right, any comments or questions for Kay?
Not on that one.
Hearing none and without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 12, and that would be reappointment to the Tourism Development Authority. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Teresa Selman's term on the Tourism Development Authority, seat number 4, collector of occupancy tax, ends December 31st, and she is seeking reappointment, and the term is for 2 years.
Questions for Kay or comments? Hearing none and without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 13, appointments to WPRTA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for the Western Piedmont Regional Transit Authority Transportation Advisory Board. Mike Queen sits in seat number 1, and Joshua Bezos is seat number 2. Their terms end December 31st. Seat number 4 is vacant. Mr. Queen is seeking reappointment, and we have received an application from our very own Rebecca McLeod for seat number 4, which is vacant. And the WPRTA director recommends her appointment, and we're requesting to remove Mr. Bezos due to some attendance issues. The term is, looks like a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2020. So we would reappoint Mr. Queen, remove Mr. Bezos, and appoint Rebecca McLeod. Now, Rebecca's term would be an unexpired term ending December 31st, 2019.
Thank you, Kay. Questions or comments for Kay on this issue? Not issue, this matter. Hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 14, from Department of Social Services, modification of memorandum of understanding between the great state of North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services and Burke County, presented by Doreen Hernandez. Hey, Doreen.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. County manager asked that I bring this matter before you again. We've been through this before. We talked about it right before we went to the budget. We knew that there was a new law that was coming out, that there were going to be standards set for departments of social services, and if we didn't meet those standards, that the county now would be at risk financially for state and federal money. At that time, we didn't know what the standards were going to be, but we just knew the law was there and it was coming. And then we received word that they were going to go ahead and set forth the standards for the departments of social services. When that was happening, there was lots of advocacy from the Department of Social Services, Directors Association, the Commissioners Association, the county managers were all involved, just trying to make sure that we set up the county and our department the best we could to react to this. So we did the best advocacy that we could, and we still ended up with something that was going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to meet. We signed, you all agreed that you would go ahead and sign the document and asked me to do that on your behalf, which I did in June 21st, 2018. And along with that, we submitted a signing statement that J.R. Simpson helped draft to cover our department in the county. Since that time, November 14th, 2018, the county manager and I received a letter from the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services saying that they wanted to modify the MOU and listed that they wanted to do this because following the execution of the MOU, they received feedback and wanted to make some changes. And I can tell you it wasn't following the MOU. We did lots and lots of advocacy well before the MOU was drafted. So they've made some changes. There's some areas that we're going to continue to struggle with. What's before you today is just the revised memorandum of understanding, so you just need to decide if that's something you want to sign. Last time you went ahead and did it based on the fact that the law exists, whether you sign it or you don't. I think I have heard that there may have been 2 counties that chose not to sign it. All the others in the county, all the other counties did so. So if your pleasure is that I sign it again on your behalf, I'll be glad to do that. If JR would like to do a signing statement again, I'll be glad to work with him on that. But there's not a lot of changes as far as what we're able to control and what we're not. We can't control people's behavior. We can work hard, we can try hard, but we can't control other people's behavior. So not much has changed in that area.
Okay, Doreen, thank you for that presentation. Questions for Doreen?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Doreen, you made a wonderful statement. We can't control other people's habits and life and all that other stuff. And I read this thing, I went through it 3 times, and I don't know why it gives me so much trouble, but last time it gives, we had the same thing, and I'm just, if you go to page 156 and several pages thereafter, and you look in the left columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and goes on down, 1, 2 again, et cetera, and the leading statement of this, the county will achieve its given annual percentage of permittees established to children born out of wedlock. County will achieve its given annual percentage, and it gives some percentages, and I'm not going to read all those. You can look at them. But the county will process 95% of crisis intervention program applications within one business for applicants with no heat or cooling source, et cetera, et cetera. My question to this dilemma is simply this. We are a pass-through budget for DSS. We do not run DSS. That's your job. So why does that not say the Burke County DSS will? Is that a problem to change it? Or is this fixed by is this language implemented by state or whoever? What?
The law.
Huh?
The law. The law indicates that the agreement will be between the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and the County of Burke, which is why, you know, we had to have a debate about who was going to sign it. I don't mind signing it on your behalf. Some have done that. Others, the county managers signed. Others, the commissioners signed. But
so,
I can't.
According to the language in this, if I'm one of your patients and I'm unhappy, I don't see DSS. I go to Burke County because evidently we're the one that's in charge. And I feel like this is undue abuse to Burke County to have that burden when it's really a DSS. And again, you know, they're paid by, we don't pay your salary. The state pays your salary. So that, to me, that language is not as it should be on that contract, because Burke County is not a state entity, and we don't get paid by state dollars. We do pass budget through from state to your department, and that's totally different. We're just here as a governing party to make sure you get paid, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. At least the Department of Social Services right in the middle where it typically is. So we get our direction from the state about what we need to do and why. They'll attach the laws and policies that relate to that law. We come and ask for the funds to, you know, to be able to implement and to be successful in those standards. And
but do you see my point? We're held responsible for that 95%. We never know if you got your 95% or not.
we'll be sharing. We'll be sharing soon with you all about where we are, but I can tell you they still have not given us the reports that we need to know where we are on each standard. I can tell you some areas we're going to struggle in real quick, but as far as the reports go, to be able to monitor every month where we're at, they're coming, they say they're going to give that to us in December and January. So we've gone all this time and we still don't have the reports that we need.
Well, can we change that language to say Burke County DSS?
No, because the law won't allow for that. What JR can speak to that, I guess. But my thought is it's written that way because of that law.
It is, and they won't allow change, and we are the party on the hook because we are the party with the money. The county is, yeah. We would have made a whole lot of changes to this agreement had we been able to. Brian spent a whole lot of time, and so has
Good for you, Brian.
Ms.
I'm
Hernandez.
not the only one that catches that. But that just blows my mind that I'm going to sign a contract or agreement of understanding that I am going to be held responsible for something that on a day-to-day hands-on situation, I'm not I'm not responsible for. So that bothers me. Anyhow, if it can't be changed, that was the question. Why is it that way? And if it could be changed, can we change it? I guess you've answered my questions, Brian, I think.
Any other questions or comments for Doreen? Okay, hearing none without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda.
Thank you all.
Gentlemen, we've been at this for about an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to take about a 3-minute break because the chairman needs some relief. Okay, so let's break for a few minutes and then come back. Okay, gentlemen, I'll call us back into session. We'll move on to item number 15, which is from the Finance Department fiscal year 17-18 audit contract amendment presented by Margaret Pierce, our Finance Director. Margaret?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This is to update the contract. Anytime the audit's not submitted by December 1st, and ours is not, we have to do an amendment to their contract. They feel that they can have it turned in by January 15th. The TDA audit, which is a piece of ours, was also a part of the reason. Theirs was just submitted Friday, and we can't put their numbers in until it's approved by the state, and we don't know when that exactly will be. But we should have that record and ours completed in plenty of time for this amendment.
All right. Any questions for Margaret?
No, Mr. Chairman, but it's funny, if you don't mind, tell them we want $1 million back, will you? Okay.
I'll tell you.
Thank you for that. All right. With no more questions or without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 16 is the request for approval for a lease purchase agreement between Home Trust Bank and Lake James Fire Department, presented by Mike Willis, Fire Marshal, and Ken Corn, Treasurer of Lake James Fire Department. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Lake James Fire Department has a truck that has reached the end of its service life. They're wanting to replace that truck with a new pumper tanker, and they're wanting to do some financing. Their finance institution asked that they get some documentation from the commissioners that shows that they are meeting their contractual agreements with the county and that they are in good standing and financially stable to carry out the loan. And Mr. Corn's here if you have any specific questions for them.
Mr. Chairman. Mike, what do they do with the old fire department? Will they sell it, or?
Typically, the departments, Mr. Corn, you might want to address this. Typically, departments put them up for sale.
Do they trade it in?
No, sir, that truck is 30 years old. And that truck that we're getting rid of is the one that's unsafe, is over 30 years old. And about the only thing we can do is hopefully some logger or somebody may want it and take the tank off and use the chassis for some purpose. But we will sell it, we're not trading it in. The last one we did.
Resale value, is that what you're saying?
The last one we had was we had to sell for scrap, and I think we got about $3,000 for it.
And they won't take trade-ins?
Pardon me?
They will not allow trade-ins, the company?
No. We're buying it from the manufacturer.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Just a quick comment. I will say 30 years, that's pretty good track life. So I would say you've gotten the goodie out of that.
Yeah. Do you need one in your driveway, Scott?
No, thank you. No, thank you. I'll pay you to keep it.
The NFPA service life is 20 years, so they've done good to get the 30 out of it.
Okay. Mr. Manager?
Will they be able to make debt service payment without a tax increase?
Go ahead and ask that question if you would, sir. I
Just want to verify that you'll be able to make your debt service payments with your current tax rate.
Yes, sir, we are. Okay. We have no intention of seeking an increase.
And you've been on 8 cents for a number of years, correct?
Yes, I think this is our 3rd year.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none and without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 17, Health Department birth control and immunization fee schedule changes for fiscal year 2019, presented by Rebecca McLeod, Health Director. Becky?
Good afternoon, gentlemen and Kate. This is an item I bring to you at least once a year because we do receive Title 10 and 340B pricing. It is a federal requirement that we analyze what our services were the previous fiscal year, determine what the birth control methods cost, and then we have to only, for the next fiscal year, charge that amount, the acquisition price. So if you look, I put the old price of what we did last year and this year for our top birth control methods that we do. They're all of them. I shouldn't say top. It's in usually the order that we put them in. And I take this to the Board of Health Wednesday, and there shouldn't be any reason why they won't approve it because we have to go with the acquisition price, and that's what this is what it is. We also need to have your blessing because you also do set our other fee, all of our fees. So I'm just asking if we can have approval of these birth control prices to go into effect January the 1st of 2019. I'm trying to edge it closer to the budget time. It's taking me a while, but I'm trying to get there.
All right, you've heard Rebecca's presentation. Any questions? Hearing no questions or comments, and without objection, this item is going to remain on the consent agenda. Moving to item number 18 is resolution for raise the age legislation funding for the year 2019 through JCPC. Rebecca?
Thank you. I also have Brandon Collins with me here today. Brandon is our lead general court counselor for Burke County. Is that the right title?
Yes, that's close enough, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I don't get it exactly right. But what we're asking with the new legislation that starts in December 1st of 2019 for raise the age legislation, all of the JCPCs across the state have been asked to ask their commissioners and legislators if once that law goes into effect this coming year, that we do a resolution that the commissioners will support asking the state for additional funding for the local evidence-based JCPC programs. Our funding, if you know, when I come to you each year, has not been raised in the last 9 years. And in order for them to put the number of youth in, which we guesstimate
Anywhere from 60 to 100 potential new youth would be involved in our system when December 1st rolls around of 2019.
and we don't really have the programs yet available, and that's one of the things that the local JCPCs are trying to gear up for. So all we're asking is, I sent you a letter, I gave you the resolution, hope you read them, I'm not going to read them to you, but I'm asking that you approve the resolution to support asking the state for adequate funding for evidence-based programs so that there would be a seamless transition over for Raise the Age. And we're here to answer any questions if we can.
Thank you, Rebecca. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, not necessarily a question, a couple of comments, if I may. I remind you of Tara Conrad's presentation to us last month, and she showed on that one chart that to treat older people, adults, it's 15 times greater than to treat the youth. And as Rebecca points out in her resolution, there's been no improvement or increase in funds to help with this cause. But I'm going to do you a big favor. The bottom line of this entire thing, this resolution, is this, that state, they're asking state to come up with more money. But the biggest thing is they're asking state, if they come up with programs, come up with the funding to do it, and it doesn't fall back on local counties to do it. And I think that resolution does that rather nicely. It's just unreal of how many times people that above us, meaning the governments above us, have good ideas and implement a program, but they don't fund it with the money. And if you don't have the money, you don't have a program. So that's basically what that resolution is doing, and I appreciate it.
Other questions or comments?
I'd like to have one more, if you don't mind. Just
let me throw one question in before you do that, before it leaves me. 60 plus will be entering the program because of Raise the Age. Why are they coming in? What's the issues?
So what that number is projected from is the current population of kids ages 16, 17 that are currently charged as an adult, but that will change as of December the 1st, 2019. They'll be charged as juveniles. So those kids we don't currently have any involvement with, those kids we don't work with. So that's how many's in the system kind of right now working. So if that number of kids is charged going forward in the year 1920, that's a potential for 60 plus more youth and families that we would be involved with, as opposed to right now how the law currently is.
And what programs will they be going into?
They've not identified specific programs. What they're looking for vocational rehab programs. They're looking for community service similar to what's on the adult side now. They're looking to expand some of our gear more towards the vocational training to have to work with those older kids. What we're seeing and believing is some of the kids now that we work with from ages 6 to 15 and 364 days will still remain with us. So what programming would be different that they've not had through that time period? and they've not said specifically what they're looking for. Teen Court is one program that they're looking to fund specifically, vocational programs, things of that nature, expand sex offender treatment, expand drug treatment, things like that to meet the needs of the older generation.
So as Commissioner Taylor eloquently put it, this, in my opinion, again, is an unfunded mandate. Are we asking for enough money for this unfunded mandate? Or are we just asking for the legislature to look at it because they passed the law and said you're going to do it?
Yeah, they've already passed a law that says that we are going to do that. December the 1st is coming. And what we're asking for is an increase in that funding to meet that demand, to meet the projected demand, because we don't know, I mean, again, that's projected. We don't know really what that's going to look like. Could be high or low. But we're asking that they put more dollars into JCPC funding to allow those children to be worked with and that to be accommodated.
Okay. Rebecca, your comments?
I was just gonna say, if you had questions about the total number of youth we serve up to the age of 15, Brandon can probably tell you how many we have in the system right now.
Currently, right now, we're working with about 150 kids and families in Burke County. That's through various types of supervision, but that's about how many we're working with right now. So that's projected, again, to increase by as much as 50 or more. We're projected to get new staff as court counselors frontline to work with these kids and families, but if they don't provide the additional resources to help with the mental health needs that are out there, with the substance abuse needs that are out there, with the sex offender needs that are out there, then it's not going to matter how many staff we have.
Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move into items number 19 and 20, our tax department reports. Danny?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Tax collection report for November. I'm just going to go over the percentages. Current year taxes were at 39.05% collected. Delinquent taxes were at 43.25%, and late list penalty category were at 39.59% collected.
Questions for Danny? All right, move forward.
Okay, the release refund report is pretty small this time. We had releases in the amount of $255.51. We had $41.43 rebuild, which gave us a net release of $218.08. There were no refunds on the property tax system. On the vehicle tax system, we had refund for $179.01.
All right, questions or comments? Hearing none without objection, these two items, 19 and 20, will remain on the consent item agenda. Thank you, Danny. Moving on to items for decision. Our first item will be Community Development RFQ for FSST North Powerhouse and Cobb Road Side Path by Shane Prisby. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Community Development Department has submitted requests for qualifications for architectural engineering services for the Fauna Flora State Trail, North Powerhouse, and Cobb Road Side Path. This is the project that is funded by the Combined Surface Transportation Block Grant, Direct Attributable Grant, the STVGDA grant for $570,000 that is being matched by the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund of $300,000. So we're excited to be out with this project, hiring the firm that we'll be working with for quite a while as we go through the first two phases of the federal highway process, which is preliminary engineering and right-of-way acquisition. This project, we've had a number of firms contact us, submit questions. The due date for letters of interest is this Friday, December 7th at 5 p.m. I'm expecting hopefully at least 4 submittals. Those letters of interest will then be ranked by a committee within the department, and that based on the metric that is provided in the RFLOI. The process is very controlled by NCDOT. They give a format for how they want things done, and how it's going to be reported. So what we're asking for you is to allow us to negotiate with the first ranked firm Should that go through, that scope of work and those rates would then be submitted to NCDOT for their approval, should they concur. They give us the green light, we would enter into a contract with that firm. If in that negotiation process it breaks down, we can't reach an agreement, we would then go to the next highest ranked firm, and then so on and so forth. And that's what we are asking for you. We will have our submittals and ranking system all complete in time for the regular meeting.
Thank you, Shane, for that presentation. Questions for Shane?
Mr. Chairman, I have two. The first one is, with only 2.5 miles, why does it take 2 years to complete it? And the second one is, I know we're going out for bids. What happens if it goes over that $870,000 and we don't get it? And I understand that our manager is authorized to do some negotiation, but what if we can't get it under this 870?
If I may answer your second question first. This is because it's for architectural and engineering services, we are not asking for bids. We are submitting for for qualifications. It's an entirely qualification-based selection. So what they're going to be doing is telling us how much per hour that they expect, cost for surveying. I mean, that's what we'll be negotiating through them, and that's where it is. So it isn't a bid, and that part comes into the secondary process where we go into negotiation, and each one of those rates, the scope of work, everything has to be qualified by NCDOT, so that helps us ensure that we have competitive and fair pricing for those items. The reason why it's going to be a 24-month contract and why I'm expecting the 2.5 miles to take as long as it will is that that is one of, if not the most developed sections of the entire lake. One of the reasons we went for STBGDA funding and decided to enter into the federal highway process is that this side path / sidewalk is going to be mostly in the NCDOT right-of-way, subject to their rules, regulations, and standards. But this funding, one, requires us to follow that anyway, but two, opens it up to a much larger pool of funding. So what we could do if, say, the funding comes in higher is we can go back to the Greater Hickory Metropolitan Planning Organization and ask for additional funding increase. We can't do that with Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, but the county is only responsible for a 20% match of that funding. Currently, we are above that 20% with the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant of $300,000, so we do have a little bit of surplus there. The idea is that we would go through the first 2 phases of the 3-phase portion of Federal Highway Project, just preliminary engineering, and that money would also be used for right-of-way acquisition and associated costs. And then we would go have our totals, where we're going to be, what we're going to build, how much it's going to cost based off of the engineering estimate, and then go back to the COG, the Greater Hickory MPO, and ask for those additional fundings for the construction phase of that project, and look for additional opportunities to match that through Parks and Recreation Trust Fund or other non-federal grant sources.
So basically, that $870,000 is just to build the criteria to get a bid?
It's for surveying, planning, engineering, but also right-of-way acquisition, and that's what we really think is going to take the longest and potentially be the more expensive aspect of that, because you're talking appraisal, you're talking actual purchase of either a property or a portion of that property or access to that property, and that's where it's going to take the longest. And then once we figure out exactly where we're allowed to be, then you do your final engineering on it. So it's going to take some time, and with architecture and engineering, time is money. So essentially it will take time, but that funding should cover not only the design work, but also enough money to purchase all of the access that we need through there. And should there be overruns in that, what we would do is we go back and ask the MPO to program that funding, more federal funding, STBGA funding, to cover that. And then our only liability of that would be the 20% match.
But we're not fishing. We do have temporary agreements or whatever okays to do that surveying, and those people are willing to participate, whether it is allowing you to cross their property or they're going to sell you the property. Is that correct?
That is correct. And Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant requires specific language to be recorded with any property acquired for that. So there's a specific process that needs to be followed for them, as well as for the federal process. With the STBGDA grant, it gives you access to a very large pool of funding to meet a very strict set of requirements. So we would have to meet most of the requirements just to be along the NCDOT corridor. So this allows us to tap into a very large pool of money that you end up spending more than you would, but you end up spending less out of pocket because you're only on the hook for 20% of that. And our 20% of that is coming from state funds through the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. So we're actually over our match percentage, so it gives us some flexibility. But that's, when you enter into these projects, it's the same money that they use for highway construction, road projects. So it's done, no matter how small, it's done the same exact way through the same exact processes.
Yes.
And that's just how it goes with this source of money.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments for Shane? All right, hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the items for decision agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shane. Number 2 in the items of decision is the adoption of the rules of procedure for 2019. I'm going to turn that over to Kay. Kay, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In your packet are the 2019 suggested rules of procedures. There are, the changes are highlighted in yellow. I would be happy to go over them if you need it or not.
Okay, questions for Kay?
Mr. Chairman, I'm somewhat complex. Can't believe it. When I call people, they can't believe it. I'll pass this down to you. We're going to talk about the changing the rules about the consent agenda. I think if you recall last year that some of this stuff, same stuff came up, and I requested that if we're going to change things as important as the rules that we operate under, that I asked that all 5 commissioners be involved and we have a work session on it before we have this meeting. And I'm trying to get to the page there.
This is, if I remember, a pretty good issue last year. And it's pretty laid out pretty clear here from what I see.
Page 230, I think it is. Page 8 in your package, page 230 in the agenda package. And you can pull that up, I can pull it up, Kay can pull it, it's on your computer, our procedures. And it's pretty obvious. The lady that I talked to this morning about 10 o'clock said, you need to find out what the motive and the reason for that is, and I'd like to know the motive and the reason. Of course, I think I know it. Nobody will be willing to admit it, but I think I know the reason. She said that it did not, it was inconsistent with the principles of parliamentary procedure and law for county commissioners organization. It is an attempt, obviously, to control the outcome of something before it even gets to the table. But you changed it from what it said prior to the board's adoption of the agenda. the request of any member to have an item moved from the consent agenda to a decision item must be honored by the board. And you have changed it, or you're attempting to change it, that the decision requires a majority vote of the board. Now, during our discussion today, she mentioned things like freedom of speech, freedom to change your mind, freedom to offer more information, the limit of speech and the limit of new information. And part of this, if you recall, stemmed from the contract on the drugs. And I asked you to move that item because there had been some changes, and that most counties were getting 75 instead of 70%, which was a 5-cent addition. And y'all broke the law, broke your procedures. You didn't hear the information. You went ahead with the 30% payout instead of 25. But the entire reason for that language, the way that the government has outlined and suggested the rules, and that's on that sheet I gave you, the bottom paragraph. It's very plain, very implicit, and to do anything else is out of the recommendation and out of the approval of North Carolina Council of Government. So my question remains, why? What's the motive?
Anyone want to speak to that?
I'll speak. I don't know if that motive is, I don't know what you're looking for, Commissioner Taylor, but it just seems to me that we have this pre-agenda meeting, just like we're having today, to discuss items that we're all interested in. As you have that discussion, we have folks here, just like we've had today, one after the other, here in this room to talk to us about the item. We have them here today. If we all agree with that today, and we say, okay, we're all happy, we're going to leave this on consent agenda, then it doesn't seem right to me to come back 2 weeks later and have one person say, well, I don't like that, we're going to take it off. I mean, we've already agreed, we've had discussion. Now, I have no problem with that person that at the next meeting saying, you know, look, here's why I think we missed something, and then if at least 3 of the group says, well, I think you're right, let's move it to decision. I don't have any problem moving it to decision. But just for willy-nilly, and I'm not saying what you were asking for was willy-nilly, but somebody could, in some other case, just for whatever reason, well, I want to take every item on consent and move it to a decision. And then on our regular meeting, we're voting on 20 items like we would today because somebody just wants to be tough to get along with.
Well,
if you want to call that motive, that's okay, but that's what I think that we ought to be considerate of.
But I see the law as the law here.
This is not the law. This is somebody's opinion, it looks to me like. I see this procedure. It says in keeping with the size and nature.
Wait a minute.
That's not an opinion.
Wait a minute. Let Jeff finish, then I'll get you. Jeff,
I mean, this, you know, you got to, right here at the start, you show a statute. But then it says other sources. And, of course, we haven't had time to look at this and see what all these other sources may or may not be. But, I mean, that's the only motive I have. It just doesn't seem right to me that, you know, you have a pre-agenda meeting, and you agree, and then you open the door for anybody for no reason to demand all those consent items be moved to decision. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm done.
Do you think we ought to walk around with our fingers in our ears and we don't listen and we don't look and we don't find out stuff for a 2-week period? And even if information that was once presented, you read a news article that changed that, every bit of that information. And the other thing is, and this lady agreed with me, the biggest thing it does to you is that if you've got one thing that you won't move out of consent to a decision. If you don't do it, you force your fellow commissioners, I force you to vote no in every item on consent agenda. When Kay fills out the report, you get a no on every item. And that is not even 1/10 fair to your fellow commissioners. And to even walk backwards, this is a backward move. The entire motive is to have control and direction that you wouldn't necessarily have. And just because we don't want to hear what somebody says, if it's valuable information, it is our duty, our responsibility, and common professional courtesy to hear it. And what you're saying is no. And I'll take a jury of 12 people any day and argue that case till the moon freezes. Because this is not in accordance with the recommendations, nor does it create and keep a board healthy. You keep it divided with this kind of ruling. A fifth grader should understand that.
Well, again, Commissioner Taylor, I'll just say, during the agenda meeting, the regular meeting, I have no problem with hearing someone's concern and have no problem with agreeing with that person if it is a true concern and the majority of the board feels that way.
Jeff, if it's in consented, you can't do it. That's the whole point. On the consent agenda, you don't get to discuss it again unless you pull it out to decision. That's what I did.
And that's what I'm saying.
Vendetta. If your vendetta is against me, don't take it out against the rest of these people because they have to live with the same rules.
That's what I'm saying, Maynard. If you come up with some new information during that 2-week period and you say, look, fellas, here's some new information, I think we should rehear this item. I've got no problem with that if we agree. None whatsoever. I may agree with you 100%. But
that's what I did, Jeff. And you didn't accept it.
As I recall, we were working under different rules at that time. We were operating under a different set of rules at that time. No. Yes,
this has been the rules of, I know, 4 years.
I'm not going to argue that. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask our counsel, JR, do you have any opinion on this particular matter?
Well, Mr. Britton, most boards don't have a pre-agenda meeting. Most boards, the chairman and the county manager get together and set what the agenda will be. And in those cases, whenever you have your Board of Commissioners meetings, your commissioners are seeing most of this for the first time. And it is assuming those circumstances that the Institute of Government thinks that a single commissioner ought to be able to move something out of consent agenda. But this board has always chosen, at least going back to the time that I was a commissioner, to invite all commissioners into a pre-agenda meeting and have all the information heard at the pre-agenda meeting and vote at that time on what the agenda will be. And once that agenda is set, the board has the ability to consider that to be that agenda unless a majority decide to take something off. It's important that a board have rules of procedure, but they don't have to be the rules of procedure that the Institute of Government thinks is superior to any other.
Mr. Chairman, this was written for boards who operate the way we operate. JR, before you went to a pre-agenda system, the chair, the vice chair, and the county manager met and determined the agenda. You did not have many items on a consent agenda. It still doesn't alleviate in any way, shape, or form the fairness, the professional discipline, the professional protocol to give all your board members opportunity to speak, to make a change as your rules say you can. And when you don't do that, you're biased, you limit free speech, you limit information, and you have a very unhealthy click board. And that's what you have.
Any other comments?
I make the motion that we leave that rule as it was, Mr. Chairman.
Well, this item is on for an item for decision. So we'll leave it on there for an item for decision at the regular meeting. But I want to know if there's any more discussion about this matter. Anybody else have anything?
Well, I just wonder if it's a rule that comes out of Raleigh, what right do we have to vote on it then? I mean, it should be what it is.
May I answer that, Chairman? Each board has a right to make its own rules, exceptions. There is examples, leadership, recommendations to aid boards and to help them. The attorney I talked today about this was, very quickly said, well, that's backwards. So you just keep that in your mind. That's backwards of what a board ought to be. We shouldn't be trying to cut off each other. When I was a board, I never did, as far as I know. When I was chairman, I never did cut somebody off from participating. And that's what you're trying to do here.
But Maynard, if we vote on this and it comes out of 3-2 vote, it's just going to be the same as it's been right now, right? I mean,
well,
I don't see a change going to be made there.
No, what they're trying to do is change what we've been doing.
Yeah, I see that, but
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we've only done this, Wayne, 1 year. Prior, as I recall, we had always operated, our rules had been a majority vote would allow the consent item to be pulled out. Only 1 year, the last year, when we adopted these rules, and I think we adopted them because we didn't realize it was written quite that way, because the rules out of the School of Government have been totally rewritten. And we didn't realize they had made that change, and therefore we got sucked into that, and I think that it was a mistake for this board.
Mr. Chairman, may I correct Madam Clerk? I know you can go back 3 years and you'll find that was the ruling. I presented that to you the last time, that that rule has been in place for at least 3 years, and I'll go back and get the ones that go further back than that. You have to have a system to allow free flow of communications. You have to have a system that allows you to accept and include new and additional information. That's the system.
I would just say again, nothing in this change prevents anybody from pointing out something that may have changed and need reconsideration.
Any other comments? All right, hearing none. And I think, Maynard, you're going to object to keep this on for a decision item. Is that correct? Or you want it on as a decision item?
No, I do not object to leave it on a decision item. The point I'm trying to make, and what we should do, we ought to have a work session on it. We ought to pull some professionals in that you'll listen to, because obviously you're not listening to your fellow board members.
Well, I'm listening to the fellow board members, but also I understand what the general statute says, that we can make our own rules and procedures, and that these others are recommendations of a way to conduct. And I understand that we, as doing a consent agenda, we're one of the few, if not the only one, that does the pre-agenda sessions, to where that we can hash out everything that we need to hash out. And I do understand that some information will become available sometimes after we set the agenda, and that can be brought up. And I would certainly vote if some new information came up in that 2 weeks before we had our regular meeting. I would certainly vote to bring that off and move it to a decision, from consent to a decision myself. So, without objection, this item will remain on the
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
May I make a response to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to read this to you really slow, folks. Prior to the board's adoption of the agenda, a request, of the meeting agenda, the request of any board member to have an item moved from consent agenda to a decision item must be honored by the board. Why do you think that says that? Do you not understand? That says you can't get 3 people who don't like Commissioner A to say, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. It is a free enterprise, free speech system. Anything else is worse than this. Anything.
All right. Moving on, without objection, this item is going to remain on the items for decision. Moving on to item number 3, resolution adopting a code of ethics. Madam Chairman? Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In 2011, the Board of Commissioners at that time adopted a code of ethics. Since then, the makeup of the board has changed, and it may be prudent to have a code on file containing the signatures of our current board members. The only thing that was changed was the signature block and the adoption date. So this would just be a refresh of the code that was on file with new signatures.
Thank you, Kay. Anybody like to speak to this?
Mr. Chairman, it really ought to be changed every time your board changes, because you really are not an authentic board or authentic rules. It's like Maynard Taylor owns GM and I'm going to build a new plant. No, you know. But anyhow, it ought to be changed every time the board
I totally
changes.
agree with you, Commissioner Taylor. And that has been a goal of the NCACC, is for all 100 county boards of commissioners to adopt a code of ethics. And they were pleasantly pleased and surprised to know that we already had one. We just hadn't re-signed it. So I felt like we need to bring it back up and re-sign it. And I agree with you. It does need to come up every year. All right. Without objection, this will remain on the items for decision.
Mr. Chairman, if everybody was okay, could that be moved to consent?
Does anybody have any problem with that going to consent? No one has any problems, we'll move her to consent. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Item number 4, County Manager, special inspections for the jail. Right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In the jail, there are certain things that need to be done, have special inspections, and we retained a company after going through a process of RFQs that we felt had the qualifications, and then I was allowed to negotiate a contract for those services. And about a week or so ago, they sent me an email and said, hey, we're about to run out of money. Well, we're not about to run out of projects, so there's a problem. And I told him, I said, you know, you're going to have to come and show me some kind of justification as to why we are short, because you knew what you were getting into when you bid or when you gave me a price and we signed the contract. And now you're telling me that you're going to need more money. So I met with them and expressed my displeasure and have given them a written notice invoking the 14-day termination clause, and told them to provide me with justification for the need for additional funding and an estimated amount that I'm not going to change. I've also had another firm that has done similar work for us in the past to come down and look at the project, and I've asked them to provide me with information. And hopefully this can get worked out and not need to come back to the board, but because of the time frames that a decision needs to be made, and there is a requirement for the inspection, so one way or another I'm going to have the inspections. I just wanted to go ahead and get this on your radar in case I actually needed a decision to support anything that I do on the board's behalf related to special inspections. And a lot of these inspections are like making sure that rebar overlaps at a certain amount, that they don't go up too high with the brick before they start filling in with cement, to make sure we don't have air pockets, and welding that may be needed on the superstructure is all done and meets special inspections requirements. So again, hopefully this will get resolved and the board will not need to be involved, but I did want to go ahead and get a placeholder in just in case.
Questions for Brian?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
How much more are we talking? Did they give you an idea?
No, they're supposed to get me a number in the next day or two, but again, I wanted to get a placeholder here just in case I needed to do something. And I wanted to let them know Brian don't appreciate rides at the expense of the county if they think that this is an opportunity to gouge us.
Amen to that.
Good work.
All right. Are there any other discussion items that we need to have at this time? Let me remind you that the Morganton Christmas Parade is tomorrow, and all of those that are planning to ride, please be at Brian's office at 5 o'clock. Kay will have tons and tons and tons of candy as we walk and hand it to the children because we cannot throw. So be there at 5 o'clock and dress in your best red Santa Claus outfit, I suppose. We do have a need for a closed session. Closed session to discuss threatened or pending litigation, to preserve the attorney-client privilege, to discuss economic development matters, and to discuss personnel matters. Yes.
Before we do that, could I just remind folks of the groundbreaking ceremony we're going to have for the Valdez Library Expansion Construction Project? That will be Friday, December 7th at 3 o'clock at the Valdez Library. Rain or shine, and it's looking like shine. So we invite everybody to come out and just want to make sure you had that on your calendar. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I didn't see your little hand. Okay. As we go into closed session, I want to invite Alan Wood and our Deputy County Manager to come in to closed session with us. I've got to get a motion to go into closed session.
So much.
All right. Have a proper motion. We'll go into closed session.
house, or is that? I can see it already. Millions of dollars more in Burke County.
All right, we did have a proper motion to come out of closed session, and there was no action taken. This time I'll accept a motion to adjourn. It's all in favor, raise your hands. That was 5-0, Madam Clerk.